first speaker will be Greg Witchlands. Did I get that right?
That's correct. Good evening. I represent the Virginia Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts this evening, and I happen to be district manager of one of those organizations. And I have 3 items here in front of me to address. First, a few facts about rainfall, flooding, groundwater, and water impoundments in Virginia. Secondly, a map from my region, which is the northern Piedmont of Virginia, illustrating potential mining impacts on water supply. And finally, I'll bring forward a resolution adopted by the State Association in regards to this topic. First off, dam failures or impounding structure failures, as they're referred to in the Code of Virginia, are not an uncommon event. 1972 in Fairfax County, as a result of Hurricane Agnes, there was a dam failure. In 1995, Timberlake Dam, plus a few additional spillway failures in Madison County, my region, occurred. 1999 brought failure of 12 unregulated dams in Hanover County. 2003, another failure in Hanover County, and in 2004, as a result of Hurricane Gaston, over 65 dams failed. Now, most of these were not regulated dams as to the size, but nonetheless, as a result of this precipitation, there was a significant loss of impounded water. In addition to this, a recent 2010 study by Harvard Medical School on climate change and health in Virginia documents that rainfall is coming in even heavier downfalls in Virginia. Moving on, in front of you, you'll see the map. This illustrates from my region where mining leases for uranium were previously held in the 1980s. It also illustrates where current public water intakes are on that map. And if you'll note, in the center of the map, the dark shaded area is the southern end of the Triassic Basin, or the Culpeper Basin, which is under intense scrutiny right now as public water supply for the future. Culpeper County and the town of Culpeper are both utilizing the Culpeper Basin as the primary component of their long-term water supply plan as required by the state of Virginia. And finally, I have a resolution here adopted in December 2008 by the State Association of Conservation Districts, and I'll just read it, it's a brief one. Whereas the Virginia Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts is comprised of 47 soil and water conservation districts that are political subdivisions of the Commonwealth. Whereas it is the objective of these districts to promote the stewardship of soil and water and the conservation of our natural resources by educating and providing technical assistance to manage, protect, and enhance the land and water for the benefit and enjoyment of the citizens. Whereas uranium mining has been deemed to have a significant impact on ground surface, Code of Virginia reference included there. And whereas there is a potential threat to soil and water resources and agricultural production from uranium mining, therefore be it resolved that the full body of the Virginia Association supports retaining the moratorium on uranium mining and milling until reviewable information demonstrating that uranium mining and milling have been undertaken in locations with population density, geology, and climate comparable to Virginia's, and that uranium mining, milling, and waste disposal operations in those locations were undertaken in such a manner as to safeguard the environment, natural and historic resources, agricultural lands, and the health and well-being of the citizens of those communities. And I would just in summary point out that the key words in that resolution are the population density, geology, and climate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to call Kay Slaughter, please.
Good evening. I'm Kay Slaughter, a retired environmental attorney from Charlottesville, and the author of an article on uranium in Virginia, which I believe you received a copy of and was published earlier this year, last year, in the Virginia UVA Environmental Law Journal. I want to touch on 5 points tonight that were detailed in my article, leading to my conclusion that uranium processing in Virginia would be a gigantic experiment. First, weather and water. Uranium processing has not been done in the U.S. under weather and hydrological conditions comparable to those in Virginia. Today you heard about the threats to water supply of Virginia Beach and the neighboring tidewater cities. Mr. Leahy noted that regulations from EPA might mitigate the impacts. However, in fact, EPA rules regarding uranium mills allow discharges whenever precipitation rates exceed annual evaporation rates. Well, in practice in Virginia, this exception would swallow the rule. Virginia, as been pointed out today, has frequent storm events. Secondly, the record in the West. Even the western mining states have been concerned about the opening of new uranium facilities. For example, Colorado, worried about its groundwater, passed legislation to more closely regulate in situ leachate mining, which the National Mining Association has lauded as a more benign technology than the pit mining likely to be employed here. 3, conflicting regulatory schemes. As pointed out in your earlier meeting, Virginia is not experienced in uranium mining. Building agency expertise would be a monumental task and would necessitate a consistent source of funding. Virginia would become an agreement state and regulate milling. As an agreement state, Virginia would have to conduct an EIS as required by the NRC. 4th, the laws have exceptions that leave areas unprotected, and I already mentioned the one relating to water. But also, much of the contaminated waste overburdened from mining is not regulated at all, even though EPA has studied it. 5th, perpetual care of decommissioned uranium sites. Once a facility closes, it must go through certain closure procedures. Title to the property then passes to the U.S. Department of Energy. What would be the cost of perpetual ownership? What types of financial assurance would cover all possible harms of such a facility from its birth through perpetual care? Your task, as you mentioned, is to carefully review these issues, as well as the rich literature on the dangers of uranium concentrations on humans and the environment. A few were noted in my report. I trust that your inquiry will result in good information for the public and policymakers to make principled decisions. Ultimately, my hope is that our legacy will not be one of contaminated land and unfit water, but instead lasting stewardship of Earth for our children and grandchildren, even unto 7 generations. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Bill Speeden or Spiden?
Speeden, you got it.
Good afternoon. I don't think I've ever been quite this far from giving testimony to anybody, but at least both of us are safe because we're both out of range. I didn't have enough copies of this to go around. This is in the form of a letter to the chairman. And this is a personal contact with the uranium industry. But I am Bill Speeden, a farmer in Orange County, Virginia. I'm told the proponents of uranium mining are trying to diminish the significance of the former Marline uranium leases in Virginia's northern Piedmont. Back in 1979, my wife and I were approached by Marline Corporation's landman to lease our farm in Orange County for a uranium mine and mill. Being ignorant of uranium mining, we had a number of questions. With that in mind, my wife and I decided to tour some uranium mines out west. Marline, hearing of our plans, offered us a company airplane out of Denver to see one of their mining operations in Wyoming, an offer we declined. My wife and I went out to Colorado and Utah to check out mines and mills, as learning as much as we could about the industry by talking to miners, mine operators, neighboring ranchers, and neighbors before contemplating signing a lease. On return to Virginia, we learned from the landman that he had been instructed to precede us at all the mines and mills I told him we were going to visit to be sure that we got the right answers. Apparently, the landman was 2 hours behind us at every stop. We had numerous visits over the next year, not only from the landman, but the company general manager, Noel Reynolds, and the company hydrologist, in efforts to answer our questions and alleviate our fears as to the safety and environmental compatibility of exploration, mining, and milling of uranium in Virginia. The sign of a bonus of $12,000 is very enticing to this dairy farmer. After dragging our feet for some time, Marlin offered us a partnership in the company. I wasn't sure just why they're putting that much pressure on me. We were perplexed on this issue until we saw a map of Northern Virginia Marlin had on the wall of the display at a local high school science fair. The map showed results of the most radioactive spots in Northern Virginia as per their scintillometer test signified by 1 bar to 4 bar map symbols. I owned the most radioactive spot in Northern Virginia, having the only 4 bar symbol on the map on my farm. Thus, potentially and arguably, we own the Coles Hill of Northern Virginia. My land is on a hill above the Rappahannock River, a major tributary to the Rappahannock River, and because of the excessive radioactive and heavy metal pollution we observed in the semi-arid West, we could not in good conscience be a contributor to the degradation of the Rappahannock watershed, and the ruination of good farmland. We did not want our farm to become a Superfund site, costing taxpayers tens of millions of dollars to clean up, as we had seen in Uranium, Colorado, Durango, Colorado, Minnesota, Utah, and many other sites. Before anybody decides on the safety of mining and milling uranium in a high rainfall climate, I strongly suggest they Google Navajo uranium and get an idea of the potential long-term problems might be in our 42 inches of rain a year as opposed to their semi-arid. As long as the technology includes tailings piles and ponds exposed to the weather, our water may well be compromised. Those who diminish the significance of the former Northern Virginia uranium releases are trying to rewrite history. Revisionist history is a disservice to the work of the Academy, the Virginia Uranium Committee, and the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Thank you for your attention.